Gospel of Matthew, the 2nd chapter, beginning with the first verse. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. For you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time that the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went out on their way, and the star they had seen in the east was ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time that he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more." Now, the story of the Magi is a traditional Christmas story. We're all familiar with it. But usually, at Christmas time, we stop reading when the Magi leave to by another route. Or if we don't stop there, we stop reading when it says that Joseph took Jesus and Mary to Egypt and escaped. We skip the last part. Why? Well, let's be honest, that's kind of a bummer. That's not something we want to think about at Christmas time. We want our stories to have happy endings, especially at a time of celebration. The shepherds respond to the birth of Jesus with awe and wonder. And they go and worship him. Likewise, the Magi respond to the birth of Jesus, traveling a great distance to offer precious gifts. But I want to talk about Herod's response to Christmas. Herod's response to the first Christmas. Because we have a lot to learn from this. Now, I know it's not a comfortable story. I can't imagine the pain of the mothers of Bethlehem, of having their young children taken from them and killed. I can't imagine the kind of ruler that would order such a thing. And at least in this life, Herod faces no consequences for this. I mean, Herod, while he's called a king, he's a king because his grandfather went to Rome and said, hey, you got these people here who are causing you trouble. Make me their king, and I'll keep them in line for you. And Rome said, okay. And Herod became king. Now, Herod subscribed to the type of kingship, which if you've ever seen Mel Brooks' History of the World Part 1, it's good to be the king. You know, I'm the king, I get to do whatever I want. I've got the power, so I can do it, and you don't have the power, so too bad. Now, Herod hears that there's a king born, and he hasn't had any children, at least not any new children, so he's disturbed by this. Why? Because somebody coming up saying, I'm the king, is in direct conflict with Herod. If the people start saying, hey, this little child is the king, they may raise an army. And they may fight against Herod. And if they're lucky, they might even beat Herod. And even if they don't beat Herod, Rome's not going to be too happy with a civil war breaking out when their king is supposed to keep the peace. So Herod says, I got to stop this right now. And he sends his children, his soldiers out to kill children. Now, when I was young, and I heard this story, I thought, Herod was stupid. Herod was wrong. Jesus wasn't a threat to Herod. And in one sense, he wasn't. Herod lives a few more years after Jesus is born. Jesus never raises an army to fight against Herod. You know, his fears are unjustified. But as I got older, I realized that Herod was afraid for the wrong reason. But if he had known the truth, he would have been even more afraid. Because Jesus didn't just come to kick Herod off of his throne. He came to change everything. He didn't come to change who the ruler of Judea was. He came to change everything. Herod believed might makes right. I have the power, therefore I have the authority. And Jesus stood up and said, no, you don't. Jesus said authority comes from God, not from earthly power. Jesus came and ushered in a kingdom not of this world. And Jesus came and began the process that would see the end of all of the Herods and the kings and the emperors who ruled through fear. Because the kingdom of God does not rule through fear, it rules through love. when Christ came, he came as a threat to the way the world was. And Herod was firmly invested in the way the world was. Now, we should not be surprised about this. And we should not be surprised by Herod's reaction to this. The world before Christ was under the power of sin. Well, you would think everybody would want to change that, right? But at the time of Christ, and even today, there are people who profit from sin. There was once a governor of Kentucky who said this state's economy is founded on horse racing and gambling, tobacco, and alcohol. Morality is bad for business. For Herod, it was the same thing. Jesus came to say that the way you look at the world is wrong. And the way that you profit from the fallen world ultimately is not profit. As he will say later, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but to lose his soul? And clearly, by reading the accounts in the gospel, Herod had lost his soul. Finally, the reason that Herod feared Jesus, the reason that the government of communist China fears Jesus, the reason that every dictator, every tyrant fears Christianity, is that Jesus came and gave his followers a competing authority, a competing allegiance. Tyrants want everybody to obey. Do what I say. And if you don't do what I say, you're going to regret it. That's how they get you to do what they say. Then Christians come along, and first the religious authorities in Jerusalem and then the secular authorities in Rome say, do this. And the Christians say, no. The authorities in Rome say, worship the emperor. And the Christians say, no. And in spite of all the years of persecution and hundreds and thousands of martyrs who gave their life for the faith, Christ won. Where is Rome today? It's a memory. I mean, yeah, the city exists, but the power of the Roman Empire is gone. One of the things I got for Christmas this year was a bag of Roman coins. I look at the coins and look through a magnifying glass, and some of them I can barely make out the name of the emperor whose face is pictured on them. Others I can't at all. And I can barely even make out the features. I had no way of knowing who these people were. They're lost. They're gone. Christ remains. The church remains. The forces of evil, the forces that like the way the world is, that profit from injustice, are still with us. They've changed names. The players have changed, but they're still there. And they still respond to the good news of Christ's presence with fear, with violence. And they cause great pain in the world. But just as Herod has passed away and Christ has remained, so too they will pass away and Christ will remain. Yes, it's not all roses and sunshine. The first actual response of somebody doing something because of Christ's ministry, the greatest part of that was terrible, was frightful, it was painful, it was violent. But ultimately, it was fruitless. The forces of evil will always try to stop the message of Christmas, but they will always fail. Our closing hymn is number 253.